that many people are interested in this topic. Because as Luisa said, the topic of the session will be youth politics and enabling solutions to local European and global challenges. And so my name is Amalia Pushkash. I'm a project officer in the Department of Peace Operations of Patrir. And as mentioned previously, I have the pleasure to moderate the session. Okay, so we have a small slide, as you can see.
Yeah, sorry, I will have to figure out how to do this, actually.
No problem.
Because I think I'm having the same problem that Kai had in the morning. You can basically see my whole Chrome now, right?
Yes, but I think
yeah, but it should be okay.
That's not very important. Oh, great. That's perfect. So welcome again, as you can see on the screen. And we have a lovely African proverb here that says many little people in many little places taking many little steps can change the face of the world. And I think it's a very accurate proverb for our session today, but of course also in general. So we are looking forward to hearing about the small steps that all of you have done or want to do in order to change the world. And mostly want to hear about the little steps that our participants are taking within their work. Which brings us to the first step of the session. That is the introduction of our three speakers. So first, I have the pleasure to introduce Natalie Moorer. Natalie is a 22 years old a woman engaged in politics in her home country, which is Germany. She is a member of the Social Democratic Party of Germany, speaker of the Youth Socialist Group of Justus Liebig University, and also a speaker in the town council meeting of Nida. She previously studied law with focus on European and international law. So glad to have you here, Natalie. Can't wait to hear all about your experiences and involvement. Our second speaker is Alexandra Sawa. Alexandra is an expert and youth worker involved in the youth sector for almost 10 years. She coordinated the Do One Brave Thing project in Poland. And she's particularly interested in increasing young people's engagement in decision-making processes. She also was recognized for her work on outreach and inclusion in EU Youth Dialogue and awarded for her approach to involving youth in decision-making in schools at the Global Youth Transforming Taipei. She is also a former board member of the European Youth Parliament in Poland in 2016. And the vice president of the Polish National Youth Council since 2019 until today. Also, she's a member of the Radicalization Awareness Network Young Platform. So quite an impressive experience so far. Our last but not least speaker is Mark Tilley. So Mark has been active in youth participation, democracy, and migration policy for a number of years at local, national, and international level. This includes founding Cardiff Council and inaugural membership of the Welsh Youth Parliament, with whom he led the consultative process on votes at 16, which was adopted by the Welsh government in 2019 as the first law in the UK to grant people voting rights at national elections. He is a British citizen based between Malta and France. And Mark is particularly interested in Brexit and its impact on young people, both in the UK and in the EU, which is a topic that we will have questions on further on. So hello to all three of you, and thank you so much for being here. Our first step as we dive into the session will be some questions, general questions that we have for you in order for us to understand more about your engagement, why, how, and be inspired by your work. What I will do, I think it's easier if I just ask the question and then randomly nominate one of you three so that the answers don't overlap, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, so our first question is, why did you get engaged in this area of work? And I will ask Alexandra to answer first. The floor is yours, Alexandra. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So the question was why I got involved in youth work. I would have to say it just happened because I started as a participant, as a volunteer in the European Youth Parliament in Poland in 2012. I went to a session and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the debating, the team building activities, the people, and quite quickly I just started organizing those sessions myself. I started moderating those sessions. I could clearly see the skills that I was gaining from this, and the friendships, of course, as well, and the skills. This is something that was hard to get elsewhere. It was the skills that you don't get in school, at least not in Poland. So that was, I felt it was really valuable. And I quickly started organizing, chairing, and I wanted to give back. So 4 years later, I was on the board of UAP Poland, and it just kind of went from there. And after that, I also started to realize that young people are not involved in decision-making processes enough. And that's how I got to the Polish National Youth Council and started working on organizing consultations with youth and getting their voice and their opinions up there to the decision makers. That's how it happened for me. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. This was really interesting, and thank you. I will now ask Natalie if she can give us a bit an explanation about her engagement.
Yes, hello. Thanks for being here and thanks for your invitation. So, why I started to get engaged? Yeah, I've been interested in politics since school, and then I became a member of the Youth Socialists because I grew up down to earth as a child of the working class. So my mom is a senior caregiver, and my father is a driver, and I was the first of my family who started an academic career. And I felt very, very comfortable in this organization. And after school, I started to get engaged in university politics. And I was wondering about a few young people who are engaged in the local politics and also in our party. And then I became a member of our party on the 1st May 2019. And then I started to visit the association in my town. And then I were engaged for 2 years. And now I'm a member of the town council meeting in Nida. Yes, meeting in Nida.
That's great. Thank you so much. Mark, you're next. Why did you get involved in this area?
I don't have a particularly kind of exciting story. I think I got involved by accident, and so South Wales is quite an underprivileged, it's quite a disadvantaged, economically less developed part of the UK, and there isn't a great deal of infrastructure for young people. So I think I probably started to get involved through youth clubs and kind of community groups that eventually kind of pointed me in the direction of maybe bigger efforts that political groups or kind of policymakers were targeting to help inform them on kind of youth things. So there was a really, really big push in the kind of early 2010s to try and make Cardiff to try and redevelop Cardiff. And at the center of that was an effort to kind of make it more inclusive to the kind of like second generation migrant population, but also young people, because it's got quite a young population. And I was very lucky to just find myself in the right place at the right time when different consultations were taking place. And I found that kind of one thing led to another. And once my appetite had kind of been triggered, I was pretty keen to kind of get more involved and see where it would take me.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think you all have very interesting motivations for your work, which is awesome. And that brings us to our second question, which is, what are your experiences in getting engaged? As in, how did you manage to get involved, which some of you already answered in the previous question, but if you have If you want to give more details, we are listening. I will give the floor to Natalie this time first. Thank you.
Yes, my experience was at first that politics is about finding compromises and the best arguments. At first, I had the idea that we are much more homogeneous in our youth organization and also on the party, but that's not. We share many different points of view in many topics, but the basic position is the same. So then it's about finding a consensus and convincing each other of the best argument. And I think it's often difficult to communicate this procedure. So this a first experience that I had in the local politics.
Thank you so much. This was very interesting. Alexandra, can you tell us a bit about your experience in getting involved?
Getting involved in politics, or was it?
Yes, in politics. In your work in general, but in your case, it's more in politics.
Yeah, so European Youth Parliament does those sessions. They are simulations of the European Parliament different committees. So the topics that are discussed are by nature, they're all political. Of course, we try to focus on solutions and not on the politics as you understand it in a party politics. So that was the first time I actually got a chance to discuss those issues. And later when I worked at the National Youth Council and I did consultations with youth, and we invited decision makers, local level decision makers to speak with youth, I realized that many kids and many young people in Poland don't actually have a chance to ever meet a decision maker, and they rarely even have a chance to talk to someone, to express their ideas, their opinions about certain political issues, just for the sake of it. So they were usually, when I did social, like public and social consultations, they were usually very surprised that we're coming to them and we're doing those consultations, and they're not graded and for it, and they have no particular end other than just to hear them out and hopefully get their opinions to the decision makers. So I realized that this is actually an issue in Poland, and I assume that, well, I learned later in my work that it's an issue in many other countries. Also later on, I got actually involved in politics, and I did work at the Polish Parliament as an assistant, and that was a great experience to see how it works from the backstage. So this is also an experience that I would recommend to everyone who has the ability and then the possibility to get engaged with actual politicians and work on the backstage of politics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Mark, do you have anything to say about your experiences in getting engaged? We're listening.
Yeah, thank you. So I think it was really interesting hearing what Alexandra and Natalie had to say. My experiences were a lot more cynical to start off with. I found that there were avenues to get involved as a young person, but they were very much centered around being the right young person at the right time who would say the right thing. And so there was certainly a push politically to try and encourage youth participation in the UK, but only in the sense that you would find non-critical young people who would tell wonderful stories about how great government policy was and how fantastic opportunities were. And this tended to kind of focus a lot on the experiences of quite privileged, relatively privileged kind of young people. And so I grew a little bit frustrated with that because I didn't think it was especially inclusive, and I didn't think it was representative of a lot of the experiences that I had grown up with, or the people close to me had grown up with. And so that's when I really tried to push to get a much more representative and kind of independent voice for young people. And I was part of a steering committee within the city of the Cardiff Council, and I proposed the idea of having a pot of money that would essentially be ring-fenced and protected to set up an independent youth council, which would be responsible for recruiting people kind of openly through a fair selection process, and people who would represent the full nature of the education system in the UK, access to service, or Wales, sorry, access to different services, represent different communities. And this is when I really kind of got a taste of what it meant to be, what it meant to kind of participate in youth activism. And I think this was a bit of a turning point where I found my motivation. And this was very fortunately a very successful project, and it came at a time when our city council wanted to be part of a UK Committee of UNICEF program called the Child Friendly Cities, which was a special kind of initiative that would encourage city authorities to have something called a dual regard policy, which meant that every policy that was being passed had to have a special additional regard for how it impacted young people and how young people would benefit from this policy. So it kind of like was the first effort to mainstream young people's rights in kind of city planning and infrastructure and things like this. And so I found as soon as that was a realistic aim, it was a lot easier to get engaged. It was a much healthier environment for kind of participation, and that was the model that we should stick to. So it started off quite cynically, and then my experiences got progressively more and more positive as I got more involved.
Thank you also so much. I think that it's so interesting what you're saying, and your engagement is so powerful. It's actually motivating. So thank you so much. Now getting to the next question, it will focus on what are the obstacles, like the practical obstacles maybe, that you faced or that you are facing right now within your work. And I will ask Mark this time to answer first, if you would like. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm muted. If I got the question right, what obstacles did I face in getting kind of active in my work?
Exactly, yes.
So yeah, so the first obstacle that I kind of alluded to was this kind of cynicism, this kind of reluctance to let young people into the decision-making process. And that wasn't necessarily the obstacle in itself, but that was maybe the symptom of the obstacle. And I think overcoming that meant trying to understand where that came from, why there was such a reluctance to kind of let young people participate in the national conversation, or international or local. And one of the reasons that I came away with was that young people aren't politically valuable. You know, as long as the right to vote under the age of 18 is the exception rather than the rule, there's no political advantage to appealing to young people. You want to appeal to the biggest political base who are going to vote for you and keep you in power. That is your principal kind of objective as a politician. And so I found that this was, you know, we couldn't really overcome our relationship with politicians until we can make them accountable to young people. And so that's when I kind of moved my gaze away from how to improve the conditions for young people now to how young people can have a greater stake in the democratic process. And that's when I turned my attention towards votes at 16. We'll come on to that later, but yeah, I think this is the biggest obstacle in youth participation, is that young people are generally not seen to be valuable to politicians.
Thank you so much. Yes, unfortunately, I think this is true, at least for many countries. Alexandra, if you would like to answer as well, we are listening.
Yeah, sure. I will speak from the Polish perspective right now. So first of all, obviously, I agree with you, Mark, with what you said fully. Also, the problem that I would see is that even if young people are engaged and there are structures built to engage them and different tools and ways and instruments used to actually engage them, sometimes that's not enough, because the mindset, because there has to be a mindset of the people who created the structures to actually listen, because just creating structures is not enough. So that's sometimes a problem. And I feel also that sometimes that is cynical, that it's meant to serve political purposes, to involve young people and to create space for them. And it's tokenism, basically. So that's one thing. Another, I would say, and that's happening in Poland, but I know in some other countries in Europe as well, is I'm not going to be able to say this word, is taking political control over different ways of representation of young people. And in Poland, that's happening with the Polish government, which is right wing, and it's trying to establish different structures, alternative structures that would allow for them to only, for example, send those delegates who express those delegates to European conferences that express the views that are aligned with their political views. And I think this is called the shrinking. I know that this process is being evaluated, and it's called the shrinking space for civil societies at the Council of Europe. And it's something that worries me a lot, because I see it happening on very practical levels in Poland and in Hungary and in some other countries as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I think this is really an unfortunate situation and the reality. Natalie, would you like to also share with us what would be the obstacles within your work in Germany?
Yes, for sure. Thanks. I see the points of getting young people engaged, but then also a problem is that the topics of young people get into the different bodies. And so important issues for me are climate protection, gender equality, and migration. And many issues like choosing a gender equality language in German, it's a big topic for young people, has not been seen to be relevant at the beginning, and I had some discussions. But I like to conduct these conversations, to give people who don't deal with my issues food for thought, but only in this way we can achieve change in societies. But this is a big problem to speak about topics which are important for young people in this local politics, because there are many old men, and so we young women have to be loud and fight for our goals.
Absolutely, I totally agree on that, Natalie. Thank you so much. Our next question would be, what are the strengths and good practices that you could share with other participants? It can be practical ways of getting involved. It can be anything you can think of. And I'm going to ask Alexandra if she wants to share with us.
So good practices. Start small. I know that's something that's probably very generic, but if you want to involve people, then you people who are not yet involved and who are not seeing the benefits of getting involved in decision-making processes. And if you want to, on the other hand, you have decision makers who are also probably not interested in hearing out the youth, then you have to, then this first moment is crucial to getting their attention and showing them that this is something that can lead somewhere. So I would say if you start small and at the municipal level or even district level or the neighborhood level, and you show people, you show both the decision maker and the young people that there are actually some things that they can agree on, and then they can get them done without much cost or without much hassle, then I think that builds a certain level of confidence in that this makes sense, that getting involved actually makes sense, because I think this is the mindset that you have to have before you go any further. So that would be pretty basic advice, but I think it works and it's important. Yeah, Thank you.
Yes, I do agree. It is important. Thank you so much. Natalie, do you want to go next and share some good practices, have advice, if you have some advice for us? Thank you.
Yes, thanks. I would like to say, look for like-minded people and hold on, because together we can argue better and convince more people. But I also know that's sometimes very frustrating when your own ideas don't meet with enthusiasm. But you don't have to take that personality. I think that's really important. And in generally, it's very important to have health balance to the engagement, to be healthy and to have enough power for reaching your goals.
That's absolutely true. Thank you. Mark, any good practices, advice, ideas?
I mean, there's not a lot I can add to Alexandra and Natalie. I think they pretty much nailed it. But in terms of best practices, I'd say try and be as inclusive and diverse as possible. You know, I think it's important to have. It doesn't necessarily need to have too much structure or ambition or anything like this at the beginning. I think it's good to be organic and flexible and just kind of see, you know, what takes shapes and where you end up. But at the same time, it's important to have a little bit of structure, and that means just trying to have like a goal, trying to formulate a kind of clear message of what you're trying to achieve, and trying to draw a kind of general roadmap to how to get there. This can be really broad, but being imaginative and being creative is important too. It doesn't have to be formal. It can be informal. It can be untraditional. It can be creative. You know, anything counts. But just try and get that kind of genuine, authentic voice of young people that represent different experiences. Yeah, I'd leave it there, I think.
Thank you so much. I think those were very good answers and really practical, and it gives us an insight on how we can deal with things if we want to get involved in politics as youth. So thank you so much. And we still have one last question that is very interesting, and I can't wait to hear your answers, which is, what have you accomplished so far with your engagement? And I will ask Natalie if she wants to share with us.
Yes, I want to. Thanks. Many of my ideas were included in our election program, and have now incorporated into a framework agreement between our party and the CDU, the Christ Democratic Union. And now a climate advisory office for our citizens will be established in our town hall in the near future, and I'm already looking forward to that. So I start to take small steps in the local political.
This is great. Thank you so much. Mark, please share with us what you have accomplished. Thank you.
So from my end, I would say that the cream on the icing on the cake would be votes at 16 in Wales. This is now a right. All 16, 17-year-olds are able to vote in national elections. This is the first time a law has been passed in the UK to allow that. And this isn't something that I can claim single-handedly, like far from it. I'm very, very proud to have been part of that process. But I think it's important that you can show, even in a small kind of, in one of the small home nations of the UK, even if it's not a fully kind of recognized sovereign country, it's a very, very good start. And it shows that, you know, young people can kind of have that momentum. And I think I'm less interested in the substance of policy areas that young people might put forward. My area of interest is that they have a platform and they have access to be able to steer that policy in the first place. So my big goal, the big achievement that I'm kind of happy with and want to keep pushing, because you can't take for granted, is the idea that we've changed the way we look at young people voting away from kind of the way we talked about it before, which was, you know, about education, it was about intelligence, it was about knowledge, it was about apathy. You know, all of these reasons were given to kind of discredit why young people should vote. And instead we've moved it more to a kind of that kind of inclusion kind of dialogue, having maybe a more rights-based agenda, making it more about equality and kind of leveling or equating the right to vote with having certain responsibilities. So the ages at which you can move out, at which you can get married, at which you can start working, the age at which you can start contributing to the state formally, being synonymous with the age at which you can start having a voice in how that state is run. So that's my that's always been my message, and I'm very happy that it's taken a bit of momentum.
That was very interesting. Thank you so much, Alexandra. We can't wait to hear you as well.
What you said, Mark, about being less interested in the substance, that resonates with me a lot, because I'm actually, if I have to think about one thing that, well, I haven't obviously achieved it myself, but it was an effort of many people who worked at the National Youth Council in Poland before me as well. But we have, well, it's still not passed, but it's being legislated right now, a reform on municipal youth councils, giving them more rights and easier. I don't want to get into detail. Basically, allow for them to work easier and to have budgets and so on. So that's a big advocacy success for us. But as I said, I'm also less interested in the substance. And actually, the municipal youth councils, if I have to say personally, they never interested me personally. I was never a member of a municipal youth council, so that was just something that I felt that bringing that change in how they work, how they're structured, would just allow more people to be heard and to have a platform for their ideas at the municipal level. But also one more thing I wanted to say is that working at an advocacy in youth work, I could probably give several examples of things that we managed to do or managed to push through different levels with decision makers. But what is perhaps even more important to me is that I stayed engaged with young people on the ground. So I've always still did workshops, and I always still did mentoring, and participated in several initiatives where I could just get in direct contact with youth. And I think that has allowed me to, this will not be humble, but I think that has allowed me to inspire some people, some young people who are just getting started. And I think that throughout the years, that might be, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 or 50 young people who were inspired and who stayed in youth work. And I think that counts perhaps even more than the advocacy efforts and successes as such. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you all had amazing accomplishments within your work. And it's admirable, honestly. So thank you so much for the answers. This were the questions for the first step of the session. Now we are going to have questions and answers from the participants. So I will leave the floor to anyone who wishes to ask our speakers anything about their work, absolutely anything. Thank you so much.
I don't know, Amalia, if you can see it or not. Sometimes you can see people raising their hands on the top just to facilitate. So Veronica, you can just go ahead, unmute yourself and raise a question.
Okay, so thank you, Lisa. And what I wanted to ask is, you see, I'm a 17-year-old, and from what I've heard, being active is a lot of fun. It can teach you a lot of things, but where should I search for these organizations or places where I can start from at the very beginning?
Yes, Alexandra, I saw your hand.
I think Veronica is Polish, probably. Are you? So I would answer that. Well, it depends on what you're interested in. I'm not, you probably have different interests than me. You can be interested in sports or culture or debating, or it depends. but you can definitely check out the Polish National Youth Council website. We have different youth organizations that that concern themselves with different topics, with different areas. And if you want, I can send you some links. I think at first you would have to answer a question on what exactly you want to pursue. If that's something more artistic or more sportsy, or it's actually debating or decision making, you would have to think about that first and then go from there.
If I could add to a comment on that, sorry, Veronica. I think it's. I think that Alexandra started to reply with, it depends where you are. I think that's a really kind of key point, that unfortunately we don't have a very equitable system, and a lot of your ability to participate, and this is something that we should all be working to change, is very much dependent on where you are and simply what infrastructure is available. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of high-level platforms that kind of engage with young people do tend to represent very specific and relatively privileged communities. So if you look at like the European Youth Forum, the Council of Europe's Advisory Council for Youth, these kind of platforms there's a risk that they can become echo chambers, because they're recruiting particular people from a particular demographic with a particular kind of education from the same areas. And so I think one of the more valuable things to question would be, if there's nothing available to you, then that probably means that the need to have kind of representative youth platforms is more important than ever. And it'd be really useful to see if there are some resources or any networks that would kind of support you to set up your own thing. Because the people who don't have the access to these representative kind of platforms are exactly the ones that need the most representation. But unfortunately, it is a bit of a lottery, and that's something that we should all be working to try and.
Yeah, if I may just add to that, if you're looking for a representative structure, a platform where you can voice your opinions, then in Poland, it's highly likely that you will have a municipal youth council in your town or city, because they have been growing very rapidly in numbers in the past couple of years. A municipal youth council, Młodzieżowa Rada Miasta is the name in Polish. And if you don't have it and you want to voice your opinions, maybe you should start it. That would also be my advice. And I can help with that if you want to. I think you're muted if you're answering.
Oh yeah, but I wanted to say that I really wanted to thank you, Ola and Mark. It was very helpful.
Can I add something? Okay, great. So I would like to say it's very helpfully for the local groups if you join them. So in your city or where you are. So, but Alexandra said everything. But I'm also here in my local group, and I know how hard it is to find motivated people. So that will be great. I think so. Thanks.
Thank you all for sharing your ideas on the question. Does anybody else have a question, or maybe somebody else would also like to share from their own experience? Because I mean, we have invited 3 people here who are obviously our experts for being youth involved in politics, but maybe some other people would also like to join to share. And I see Veronica, the other Veronica, we've already had this confusion today. Who wants to say something?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, I would love to thank you all for engaging with us and creating this event and talking about all of it, because it's really inspiring and helpful. And I would love to ask you, how do you overcome those obstacles that come out on the way with different politics and different opinions?
Can I ask, do you mean young people or people who maybe are less open to kind of hearing the voices of young people?
Who are in charge, because like when young people want to make a change and do something to help others, there comes the problem that the older ones are saying no or are just laughing at them. And how do you overcome those problems that come up in the way? And how do you like be more confident and do it anyway?
Yes, I would like to answer because I already talked about this. So I absolutely can understand this, and I also handle with those problems. So I talk about the climate advisory office in our town, for example. This is an example, or about using gender equality language in our election program. So, and many older men said, "Oh, these are not so important issues," and I would like to talk about our sports hall and not about your climate protection or something like that. And so it's really important that you look for like-minded people, and when you know friends or someone else who wants to get engaged, that you are together in those organizations. And it's really important to have arguments and to hold on. But yes, it's really difficult, and sometimes it's really frustrating. So I'm absolutely comfortable in my youth organization in university, but in the local politics, it's sometimes really hard with people who are not interested in my issues. But it's much more easier if you have your people and argue together.
Okay, thank you.
Could I add a tiny bit to that I've just thought of? One way to approach this, and it's maybe like the selfish, well, not the selfish, but the cynical kind of approach, is to understand, what the needs of a politician are, and trying to kind of sell it to them in a language that they understand. Now, the way I kind of approached this was always that, and it's very context specific, but the way I approached it was that there are 1.5 million people in the UK who are between the ages of 16 and 18. And that's a lot of people who could potentially vote and swing an election. And so as a politician, I'd be thinking, what can I do to not only win over the support of these young people? This is a huge demographic, but also then give them the right to vote. And if you're like a savvy politician, if you're interested in winning elections, then this is like, it'd be a very tactical move to invest in young people and try and get them to vote. So from a very kind of self-centered perspective, I thought it'd be quite an effective tool to just sell them how big a potential demographic they're ignoring, and how useful it can be to their own kind of political ambitions. And the more holistic side to this conversation as well is that people seem to have this idea that investing in young people is investing in like others, another group, without kind of realizing that investing in young people generally invests in things that affect all of society. And it's not just young people that invest in better, in a better curriculum, in better infrastructure, it's all of society. It's the health services, it's the justice system. It's, if you can take the burden away from these kind of institutions, then it's a huge win to invest in young people. So everyone kind of benefits, whichever way you look at it. And I think it's about changing the way people look at young people from this group that's kind of someone else, to investing in this group also benefits me and you and kind of all of us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing. I also rose my hand, or however you say that, raised my hand, sorry. Just because I wanted to add something, because Mark, you also just mentioned that politicians basically, I mean, they also want the votes from the young people, you know, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned that after Natalie's comment, because Natalie has been talking about all the issues that a lot of young people actually want to talk about, you know, like climate change or gender equality, and also things like the discussion about gender language that we have in Germany. And I mean, at least for the German context, which is obviously what I'm more, what I know more about as well. I think we can see that because we have the elections this year, and the Green Party that is focusing on just these topics has had such an increase in voters and in people joining them. And so this is actually where we can already see that youth can make a difference already by voting. And obviously it's a problem that, you know, people under 18 cannot vote in the general and the national election. But this is, I mean, because we've been talking about how we can make an impact, and I think we just really have to stress that we can vote if we are 18, at least in most of the countries. And I also see that there are some comments on the chat. So I don't know whether Rafaela, you might want to start and say your question again out loud, or Mariam.
Yeah,
Moses.
for sure.
Yeah.
So my question is more about kind of a more general question, but I was just wondering, how would you kind of assess, I'm not sure if this is the right word, but just how do you see youth engagement in politics nowadays? Because all around the world, we have examples of young people that are really engaging in politics. And I just moderated a session about Belarus and the role that youth has been playing regarding the protests in Belarus. And but this is just on one hand, because I'm actually from Portugal, and so I have the other side that I'm also thinking of. And I know a lot of young people in Portugal that actually are more disconnected of politics because of recent events. And I'm talking about now about the rising of right-wing parties all across Europe. And so I was just wondering, what is your opinion on this? Thank you. For any of the speakers.
Yeah, I can start. Poland, as you probably know, is in a curious situation right now. It's the turnout at the elections among youth has been growing, so that's good. And we have seen some youth on the streets, which is recently we have seen them on the streets when the Polish government, the Polish Constitutional Tribunal has banned almost all abortion. So that was something that actually sparked young people to go out into the streets. And I think that goes to show that a lot of education is still needed, because this decision of the Constitutional Tribunal was only possible because of what the ruling party has done earlier on to the Constitutional Tribunal. And a lot of people were protesting on that years ago, but they were mostly people over 40. And only when the governing party and the Constitutional Tribunal, only when they went in for very tangible things that you have in your life, like your right to decide about your own body, only then the young people, and it will sound horrible what I say now, but only then the young people have realized, okay, we need to actually care about this, because they can do that. So I think it really goes to show that if we have had understood that better earlier on, then maybe, I don't want to speculate, but maybe things would have been different right now in Poland. So I think it took a lot in Poland to get that turnout at the elections among youth higher and get youth on the streets. But on a positive note, that's finally happening. So what is needed right now is something that will catalyze this energy and that will keep young people engaged. So we actually, I think now is the moment that we actually need to do everything we can to somehow convince young people that what they were fighting for on the streets, and other postulates that and ideas, opinions that they have are actually possible to be implemented and to be heard. Because if in the next couple of months or next couple of years nothing will change, then this group that was just awakened will just go back to being disengaged, and I think that's the biggest threat, and they will go back to being disengaged for good, because there will be this will not be a disengagement coming from a lack of awareness, but a disengagement coming from disappointment. And I think that's the worst that can happen in terms of political, of being active in politics and caring about stuff. So that's the Polish experience.
So I would like to add something. I'm totally agree with you, Alexandra. And in my town, there were also right-wing parties. So I don't know, in Germany, there's the AfD, the
alternative for Germany.
Yes.
Alternative.
Yes, not really. So, and after the last election here at the local point, the AfD has lost many votes, because many young people candidated, and now I think we are four people under 22 who are now in our local parliament. And I think that's a good way when young people see and that other young people are engaged, wanted to change something. So this can make a difference. And also political education is really important, and it has to start in kindergarten, I would say. So thanks.
If I might, and I'm getting a bit bored of my voice, so I'll pipe down after this. But it's one of those kind of really frustrating problems that I shouldn't even call a problem. The idea that young people all speak as a single group with the same voice is also maybe one of the assumptions that we need to kind of break away from. And it is frustrating. Like, I'm going to point to Brexit as a campaign that I worked kind of tirelessly against over a number of years. You know, I did come across quite a lot of young people who are quite active in different, ideologically different party groups like UKIP, that were maybe a lot more socially and economically right-wing than I like to interact with. But it comes back to this conversation about whether we need to separate the process and the outcome, and the process is all about making sure that we have kind of equality, we have a rights-based inclusive agenda for young people, and that means that's democracy. Democracy is the right to hold and express views that maybe you don't agree with. And so we need to be very careful of falling into this trap of maybe just promoting progressive youth voices, because that could ultimately be counterproductive, as frustrating as it might be. And the other way to look at it is that democracy is only really democracy if it's informed. And so that participation has to be informed. And so when you come across groups that maybe hold views that are a little bit surprising or a little bit more kind of right-wing, you know, the best way to kind of address that is by making sure that they are informed. They have got access to the political discussions, they have got access to the resources, the same things that are kind of making sure that we're all part of the democratic process. So it's inevitable, you know, it will happen. You will have young AfD members, you will have young UKIP members, Front National in France. We just have to accept that. But the way to kind of mobilize enough young people means giving the resources to ensure that they are able to kind of advocate based on the facts, rather than just what's cool or what's different or what their parents say, or, you know, or what's in the news.
Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone for your answers. It was very clarifying.
Yeah, thank you also for raising the question, Rafaela. Moses, do you want to say something? Because I've noticed that you wrote something in the chat, but I'm not quite sure whether I understood. If you don't want to, are there any more questions or remarks also? Comments? Mariam, you can just unmute yourself if you want to.
Yes, I just thank you, Luisa. I just chatting because everybody, when someone is speaking, I wouldn't like to interrupt and just yeah. Thank you very much for make the point of this kind of Facebook group and LinkedIn. Yeah, I just make this point because I think that here is a lot of nice people. Just would be nice to be connected, because if we would like to think about the youth policy and so on, just yeah, I got this information about this program and this Zoom links by email address. So I and your Luisa, I think you are the center. Yeah, I have that. And that I joined later, sorry, because I had another exam and so on. And I just would like to rise up about the youth policy. How the most young generation are inspired to be involved in youth policy, because we have the interesting case in Georgia and it's under developing. Now we have youth agency, which is more or less working well, but would be great to have the voice of most young generation. And what kind of practical experiences most of you have to engage the young generation to be part and make their own marks on the planet, to make changes in their own country or on the global level, which is hard, but even there are examples. Thank you.
The problem might be that our speakers have already shared a little bit about this earlier in the session. So would be kind of repetitive. If you want to, Mariam, we are live streaming this session on Facebook. So, and this will still be available after the session. So if you want to, I think you can also just go back there and maybe look at it yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned that I joined later, and
yeah, it's
maybe
okay.
this was mentioned, but I'm passionate about this because I think that when we're speaking about something, we have to try to engage more people related to no matter if it is young youth topic or other. If it's touched to public, so the public have to raise their voice. And it have to be considered not only by 2 or 3 people, but mostly it have to take the community voice just to make some changes.
Yeah, I agree. Would anybody still like to answer to that right now?
Yeah, I can answer quickly, because I've actually hosted. It wasn't me who hosted; it was another organization. But they invited me to speak to a group of young people from Georgia who were on a study visit in Poland with one of their local politicians and one of their teachers, I think. And what we discussed back then was how to establish municipal youth councils in Georgia, and I think that's underway in at least in some regions. Unfortunately, I don't remember from top of my head the regions or the cities, but I know that was happening and that they were taking our the knowledge and the know-how that we already have in Poland to establish those structures. And I think this is a good first step to actually have a platform that can amplify the voices of the community and of the youth in the community at the very local level. So you can check that out if that's happening. Yeah, and I think that's, of course, later on when municipal youth councils have been around for a while, there's another problem of them becoming sometimes a bit, how to say that, they are becoming, in some cities or towns, they're more of a decoration, or they're just used by politicians sometimes, so that they can say that they are engaging youth when in fact they're not. But I think at the level of an idea, that's a good structure and a good idea, and it just needs work, constant work and constant monitoring to see that youth are actually being listened to, rather than just the structure being in place. So that's, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions. It was a really interesting.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting point. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, sorry. I didn't know you wanted to say something else. No, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we don't have enough time. So I think what we're going to do now is go on with the panel discussion that we have prepared. So it's a range of questions that are a bit more general than more specific, than the first ones. And of course, all participants are invited to speak, raise their hands, whatever they like, when they feel like it, if they have anything to say or to add. And also the speakers can answer whoever wants first. So it's really, it's a free discussion. So the first question, but I think it has been touched a bit previously, but maybe we can go a bit more into details, would be how can youth implication in politics prevent radicalization and conflict? So whoever wants to go first.
Okay, I'll throw something in first. Very simply, instead of conflict resolution, we could look at conflict as a, if we look at conflict as a process, then the very kind of early stages would be prevention, and that means kind of responding to issues before they arise, and that could be anything relating to aggravating or causal factors to conflict, such as climate change. It could be working on building participatory, inclusive societies, which means kind of including young people. It could be anticipating divisions and feelings of social exclusion before they arise. So it's a very small step, and it's perhaps not the sexiest part of conflict resolution, but it's definitely one of the more important steps. If we get to the actual conflict, or what is the other element? If we get to the conflict or radicalization stage, then it's too late, and that shows failings in that society already. So I suppose anticipating those failings and not getting to that place in the first place.
Yeah, building on that, I would say that the participating in politics, maybe not. When I say politics, I don't mean party politics. I don't mean that you need to get involved in a party, but just being an active citizen who is engaged in decision-making processes in some ways. I think that requires skills that you might have naturally, or you might gain along the way. But those skills, basically, they also help you just talk with people and not go into conflict, or not go into not assume things about different groups or different people. And I know that's also maybe unsexy, but that's just soft skills for you that might help you in life not to get into conflict with different groups, and actually be able to realize that they have different motivations and different needs, and that needs to be respected. That's one thing. But also preventing radicalization. Well, in its theory, radicalization stems from some unfulfilled resentment, from some resentments, from some needs that were ignored of some groups. And I think if we create a society in which everyone, I know that's utopian, but everyone, or mostly everyone, has an ability to participate and to have their voice heard, then there will just be less people with those kind of ressentiments, or with their need, with this feeling of their needs being ignored. So that's just yeah.
So I would like to say something. At first, I can totally understand that we're not talking about that it's necessary to be a member of a party, but I'm here as a member of a party, and I think it's super cool and also important that we are in parties. So I see the goals and what, for example, Fridays for Future has achieved here in Germany. I don't know if you heard about the newest decision of our constitutional court, which is also a goal of the youth organization Fridays for Future, and this is good and helpfully steps. But I think it's really important that our voices are heard in these old structures, which rules. So this is really important, and I also can understand the points that you stressed out about radicalization. So about interests which are not heard. And so here in my town, there are no refugees. We have no refugees here in our village, because I think we have about 600 citizens, but we have so many people who voted right-wing parties. So, and I think that's really important to speak with those people really early, to develop an understanding of democracy, of more. We need more political education. Started in kindergarten, we talk about those topics, and yes.
Thank you so much. Does any participant would like to add something, or has a related question or anything? If not, I have one. Oh, Veronica, I see your hand.
Well, I have a question to Natalie. Could you tell us more about what it's like to be at a party while being a young woman?
Yes, I can. So I thought it will be not easier, but I thought so that yes, because I'm a young woman, and I thought that many people would be happy that young people are interested in politics, and thought, wow, here in our local organization, great. But I think it was harder as I accepted, but I totally like it, and I think it's really important and good that I do this, and I will go on. But yes, there are many issues that are not so important for other people than for me, but I have to go through those conversations, and I searched at the beginning for like-minded people, and during the procedure about the election program, we had some discussions, and yes, I had some arguments. I talked a lot with the people in our organization, and now I'm for 2 years here in the organization, and we have more younger people then, and I think it's a long way, and I have to take one step, and yes, I would be really, really happy if you yes, if you are interested in the, oh, I'm sorry, this was not, that was my fault. So I would like to say, I think it will be really great if you are interested in doing some work in parties, if you want to. And yes, these are my experience.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer, and also thank you for inspiring all young women.
Can I add to that? I was not. It was not an elected position. I worked as an analyst at the Polish one of the Polish parties that was Nowoczesna, Modern. That was a liberal party, and I think obviously a lot depends. Probably in terms of the position of women in parties, a lot depends on which party it is. So in the Liberal Party, it was. I didn't feel much different from how men were treated, but still, I think one thing that I've learned there that I think is important to realize at the very beginning when you get involved as a woman is that you yourself have to allow yourself for being as visible and as recognized and as awarded as men would, and to take as many chances as men would, because I've had I felt when I joined this party, when I started working there, I thought that I was a confident person and that I was always taking as many chances, but as a guy would. But I realized at some point, actually, my boss, who was male, he showed to me that I wasn't, and that there were instances in which, for example, I remember one situation. I was organizing a consultation. So that was sort of like two politicians, two MPs, and some experts, some economists, so maybe 5 or 6 people. And I was organizing it. I was contacting everyone. I was doing background information, briefing, and so on. So I knew the topic. But I didn't think that, I never thought that I was supposed to sit at that table. Basically, I thought I was supposed to organize it, and then I backed out. And he said to me, "What are you doing? You're supposed to sit at that table. We want your opinion there. You organized it, it's yours." And then I thought, okay, I'm not, this is something that you also have to go through within yourself as a woman, I think. Yeah.
That was very inspiring. Thank you so much, Alexandra. So if nobody wants to add anything to this, I'm going to go on with the next question, which is one a bit food for thought, let's say. And it is, what mechanisms do you think should be put into place to improve and ensure youth participation in decision-making processes at an institutional level, whether nationally or internationally? Do you have any ideas on that? Anyone who wishes.
I suppose, in a word, simplicity. Just have a mechanism in place that allows people to have their voice heard or contribute to the decision-making process. And I think there's no shortage of young people who have very valid observations, who have very valid experiences that aren't being listened to. And I think one of the problems is that they just simply don't have the mechanism, or even perhaps the language or the confidence. We talked about confidence before with the inclusion of women in youth processes, but like maybe people just don't have the confidence to have their voices heard at the right tables. And this is a problem we've discussed already, but it's it's not inclusive if the process only exists to a select group of privileged and relatively advantaged young people. And so it's just having a very well communicated, very visible, and otherwise quite simple process of, it could be regular consultations, it could be even online consultations, anything that kind of is just inclusive and accessible, but having some system in place to show that you're taking young people's voices seriously at an institutional level.
should I go next? I think that's a very hard question because the national contexts are so different. We have different starting grounds. I could talk about what's needed in Poland, but at the same time, I know that, for example, we are at this stage with municipal youth councils that they are actually usually becoming more decorative, and we need to kind of refocus on them. While in some countries they don't even exist yet, so it's really hard to answer it like that. But some general thoughts, I would say that public consultations need to be simplified, and probably that applies to most countries in Europe, because the thing is that we have many mechanisms in place and many legislations that force politicians to consult with not only youth but with community in general. But the processes are so hard, and they're so you need to, as you said, you need to have the, for example, the skills in terms of like how to write an opinion to legislation. It's not easy. You have to be able to read legislation first with understanding, and I've recently the Polish Federation of NGOs, they have started this this new, I would say, a new way of making of organizing consultations. They did public hearings, so people could just come and speak, and so that takes the pressure of actually writing up a document, and also you don't have to really know where to send it, and how the process works. So I think going in the direction of simplifying it and maybe even making it so that it doesn't have to be written is a good way to go. Yeah, but also what I said at the very beginning, whatever you may have, all the structures and all the mechanisms in the world, and they can be perfect in how they're structured, but if the people behind them don't want to listen, they will just not listen. And this is happening to youth in Poland a lot right now. So that's important to remember. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was my last question. I don't know if anyone wants to add something, to share something with us before we will pass to the next session.
I think if nobody else would like to share anything, well, I see that Mariam, she might be typing in the chat. But before everyone heads off, before we wrap this up, I just shared again in the chat the links for the next sessions that we are having, that you should also have received on email if you're registered for the event, because we will start right away with more sessions. And again, we have prepared 4 different ones. So we have one on the climate crisis, that was also topic of this discussion, one on empowering communities through art. So this is another approach to what we can do to stand up against discrimination and hate. Then we have another one that will focus on how to actually make a campaign. We will have people from Amnesty International, but also from the Do One Brave Thing project that has been organized here in Romania and also in Hungary and Bulgaria, I think, and other countries. And then we also have an amazing session with people from Myanmar who are activists in Myanmar. And I really recommend you joining at one of these sessions. Unfortunately, you cannot join all of them. And then in the evening, we will have another program, and you can just check it out in the chat. And thank you for all the speakers. Before Amalia will wrap up, I'm really glad that you all took part, and it was really, really cool to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was really a really interesting discussion. I had many more questions, but unfortunately, time flew. Maybe, as I think it was Mariam suggested, we could stay connected on different platforms, or share our emails, or write to Louisa eventually to connect everyone who wishes to. And I will now let you go, if you wish, to the other sessions. That will be very, very interesting. Thank you all for participating. I wish you a lovely evening.
Thank you.